continue becoming West Ashley is changing, and I think it's going to be wonderful. Just want to make sure it works. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments?
What do you do?
With that, we'll go into board questions and then.
The new design that we don't have currently, but it changes minimally, but not significantly.
But the whole thing will be repaved. You know, like there's opportunities to.
It'll be resurfaced and restriped.
Okay. Thank you.
Material on the front facade of buildings 500, 600.
Yes, sir.
A note. Plaster panel system. Is that going to be matching what's existing on the Whole Foods?
Correct. That's the gray, what I call texting. That's just a proprietary name for it, but yes.
Okay.
Precast, scored joint. Yes.
Jonathan, can you talk for a moment? I mean, it was an interesting aspect dealing with the accessibility from the surrounding neighborhoods, farm field, park estates. And I remember at one time, the connector to Sunset was open to traffic. I don't know when that was closed off to just the sidewalk, because I went over there a couple of days ago.
The unnamed street.
Yeah, the unnamed street.
So one of the things that David had asked for, and we've reflected in our landscape plan, it may need some further definition, and I'd be happy to work with David to further define it. But we had talked about trying to improve that corridor a little bit, make it a little more inviting, make it a little more walkable. That's something that we're happy to do to help with the concerns that were noted by the public, and certainly concerns that were noted by David, and concerns that we have. I mean, we obviously want as much foot traffic as we can, possibly get to the center. And if that's a good corridor to, help with that, we're happy to do that.
I could see it following up on what Mr. Swift and Ms. Jacobs were saying, that it would be a natural connection from the Greenway back on through Sunset over to the site. I remember when the A&P used to be there, and that was an open road, and it was a back way for Parkwood Estates to enter the property. Is the intent on the landscape, the green area that you're showing on that side, is that, what is the intent of that?
Up here,
No, right next to the buildings.
up here.
There, right there in the rear. Yeah. It appears to be a back door that's accessible for the public.
Well, no, on those buildings, that's actually service the tenants so that we don't have to do it from the front. So it's a little bit of green space in the back, but the sidewalks there are intended for deliveries. And that would be the primary way that they bring in product to those stores. Those buildings, so 300 is double loaded so that you can come in off of Savannah Highway from the sidewalk. The inline shops are not double loaded as shown currently.
David, can you go to the building 300 for a moment at the elevations? I just want to make sure that, well, actually I could have done it from there. The riser, I just wanted to make sure I understood. The riser room
Yes, sir.
is on Savannah Highway?
It is. We work on that quite a bit to try to figure out where to put it. Obviously, that building is visible from all four sides. So what they did, which I think is a creative solution, is they essentially just pulled the wall out just enough to get a door on each end. And you have roof access and the riser room essentially on that side of the building. But if you look at it in elevation, David, I think it's the next.
Yeah, I think it's.
If you look at it in elevation, it doesn't look like a riser room. So that was our attempt to be creative and try to,
And this is.
Camouflage.
This is what you're talking about.
yes, sir.
A tree is going to be planted in front of it.
Space.
I was just curious. Yeah, it's the old saying, doctors bury their mistakes, architects grow vines.
I like that. I'm looking at the landscape drawings.
I'm sorry.
I'll let that pass. I think you have some palms in front of it.
Yeah, I agree. I don't see a true shade tree there, but there are some palms and other things there that help break that up.
It's just a funny place to put the riser room, as opposed to one of the other less. But anyway, I'll get into that later, but nonetheless. And I see that you have a little riser room on the back of this building 200, I think it is, where the risers.
Yes, sir. We had more room between the property line there, and that particular corner of the building is not as visible as the 300 building. So I understand your comment. Certainly when I saw it, I haven't ever oriented a riser room in this manner, but it was an attempt, knowing that this is a four-sided building, to try to, deal with it as well as we could. And, all things being different, if we had enough room, we might have located it on the plan east side of the building, but there's just not enough room on the property line there, and then on the other side is the main entrance. So, and you obviously can't put it on the front side of the building, so you're really limited on where you can locate it.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
The only question I guess I had is, y'all. Gonna sit behind y'all. Have y'all looked at any engagement of that side? Because I asked because my daughter plays tennis over there, and I know there's a lot of people who walk from there.
Certainly something that we can consider. There is a drainage ditch kind of between the two areas. So we need to get creative, but certainly, we would be willing to take a look at that and see if there's something creative that we could do that works for both the city and for us and the community.
David, can you go to the overall plan or just the plan of the inline building? That was it. The existing shops, 2001 square feet,
Yes, sir.
that is there already.
Correct.
And some of the plans show the new building set a little bit back and some show it in line, and the landscape plan shows it a little bit in front. Do you know where exactly?
Yeah, if we look at the site plan should be the most accurate.
So so right in line.
Yes, sir.
Right, and shows it sit.
Are you talking about Lucas?
The height. Right here, this little bit effectively becomes the height in between you and all, and it was showing.
Any other questions?
Patterns and the bridge. What'd you call it? Text. All the materials are to be contextual with what was done in phase one. Is that?
Yeah, generally, we were trying to tie it all together and have a palette that was consistent across the development, and also that was.
Did have one other question, because a great comment came up about mobility and the ability of those people. And it's something that I think the board is looking more and more into. I mean, can you address for a moment just how y'all have embraced and encompassed the aspect of just pedestrian? Yeah, just the way that y'all dealt with anything specific that you dealt with in regards to how a pedestrian or a cyclist or somebody like that would
Pedestrian
approach?
experience,
I'm sorry.
pedestrian experience.
There we go.
Yes, I mean, we always, I mean, the pedestrian experience and cyclist and pretty much any active person is obviously very important as a Whole Foods customer. So on any of the centers that we do, and this one in particular, we try to make it as pedestrian friendly as we possibly could. Now, that being said, just being frank, Savannah Highway is not super pedestrian friendly. So, part of the location, one of the public made a comment about the location of building 300 and its proximity to the road. We didn't initially make that decision. That was something that was comments from city staff back when we went through the first time. And I understand, their perspective of it's up close and it's not inviting, but the whole idea behind that, and a lot of other municipalities are doing it, is to locate the building close to the sidewalk. People can walk by and go straight in the building instead of having to walk all the way around. So whether you love it or hate it, there was intention behind it, and the intention was to try to make it more walkable. We also took the sidewalk all the way up Farm Field to try to make as big a connection to the tennis behind and to the walking trails behind as we could. And as I said earlier, I think we need to do a little better on the unnamed street to make it a little more inviting, but that is another potential pedestrian, avenue for folks to come into the center. So, we're certainly willing to listen to any other ideas that you have and that you would like us to look to implement. But, we did the best we could, knowing that this, was already a developed center and we had to work within some existing limitations.
Well, I mean, if there's any indication, parking lot is always packed, and which is always good. And I think the point being that, and you'll probably hear this more in board discussion, probably part of the motion if accepted, is that whereas Savannah Highway is such an important component and artery within the city of Charleston and West Ashley, there's a phenomenal resource behind of these neighborhoods that are becoming also walkable. And how is all of this being incorporated within the context of a site and a development such as this? And I know that this is the smaller component of the Whole Food Original, but it's just a concept and a thought to be considering as we walk through this. And something that I think would even make it so much more successful if we can ultimately, upon completion of construction, successfully address that thought.
Understood.
But thank you.
Certainly it's something that we look at as well, because it's important to our tenants and our customers.
I know you got a lot of balls in the air, so we appreciate it all, but just an important consideration from our standpoint.
Absolutely.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I had one question relative to the capacity of the site, just thinking through parking, how the parking counts related to the overall development.
Yeah, David, you may go to help with this a little bit too, because we just went back and forth about it. But ultimately, I mean, we certainly meet code. I would certainly say that the density that we're replacing it with is, similar to, if not less than, what we had before. And ultimately, right now we're parking 2 grocery stores. No matter what use we put in, I would suspect it parks better than 2 grocery stores during their, busy hours, particularly in the afternoons.
So that's good, but is there a hard count that you need for the amount of retail and grocery that you have there?
So the numbers that you provided today, that considering the new development, obviously.
Yep.
And here, I believe they were 44 over what zoning is asking.
Yeah, I think it's actually my trusty assistant here just handed me, the talking points that I should have already had. But David, what I'm showing here is total parking required 321 spaces and total parking required 394. So that would put us 70 and change over.
Right, so 321 required, 394 provided.
And that's what I have here, although this looks like this was after we sent something to you, David.
So yeah,
Let's go with your number.
I have total parking required 337 and total provided 381.
Yeah, so around 50 plus or minus surplus.
44.
Not good at math either.
How many do we have now?
David, we probably have a slide that shows, the demo plan probably shows it.
Remember?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
May not, but I'm hoping.
I don't remember what sheet it's hard to read unless I zoom in.
I'm just curious, that parking lot is slammed all the time.
Wait, does that show parking count? Go back.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Everybody parks there that goes to eat it. Squeeze the line.
Squeeze the line.
Yeah. I can't.
Wasn't there a shared parking agreement with Swig and Swine
Uh,
and the center?
There is a shared parking room at Swig and Swine. We owe them.
I remember that.
It's 18 spaces. They're not dedicated spaces, but we have on the plan east side of that drawing in the vertical parking that goes north to south. We have 18 spaces that are listed as Swig and Swine parking allowed is the waiver.
So that's 18 in addition to what's required by zoning?
No, that's included. Yeah, that's shared space.
Any additional questions from the board? David, staff comments, please.
Staff observation. The height scale and massing buildings are keeping with the existing phase one building. The structure fit in nicely with material palette used for phase one is being matched in this proposal. Then my staff comment, it starts with number 2, I apologize. Restudy the front facade of buildings 500 and 600. We like the design direction, but feel the rhythm of the ups and downs. Let me go to that elevation, please. We like the design direction, but feel the rhythm of the ups and downs of the plaster panel system could be improved upon. The plaster panel system just to the west of the building hyphen seems to be in conflict with the hyphen. And we question why it drops down further than all the other sections of plaster panel. Number 3, the applicants are over the zoning required parking spaces. I say by 44, but whatever you are over the zoning parking spaces by, DRB asks the applicants to provide pervious pavers equal to the square footage of the overage in parking spaces. Staff comment number 4, staff recommends that the decorative pavers used in front of Whole Foods also be expanded to the front of the new buildings. Staff comment 5, staff asks that the crosswalks shown in the site plan are done with the same decorative pavers as used. Staff 6, the adjacent neighbors have been asking for improvements made to the pedestrian connection in the southwest corner of the site, which the applicants have provided in the form of landscaping. There appears to be some existing landscaping for phase 1 that should be accounted for, preserved and incorporated into the design. And as Donna mentioned, maybe some of it's too tall, either be replaced or staff comments. I've added a staff comment number 7, and I want to get to the bottom elevation is the north elevation facing Savannah Highway. You can see the panel in the middle. And if you look at the plan, you can see where this projects out and the electric panels are behind that. And staff is just recommending that it be moved from the side of the building facing Savannah Highway to the west elevation where you already have some utilities. I don't think it would be quite as visible over there. I know it's covered by a panel, but I still think you'd be able to see the
What building number is that again?
300. I think as you approach from the north, from the east or west, you would still be able to see the utilities projecting out of the building. So we just suggest moving it to the west facade instead. With that, staff does recommend conceptual approval with the conditions noted.
Thanks, David. Mr. Thomas, do you have anything you want to clarify from public comments or staff comments?
Couple things. There was a comment from the public about an issue with the ADA wall. I'll look into that and see if we can do something to better make accommodations for that problem. Sorry, I was. The only other thing I would say is certainly, we'd like to achieve consensual approval. We'll work with David to address any staff comments and come up with something that's mutually agreeable to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are now in board discussion. Give a motion.
For me to understand a little bit better, comment 6. David had, can you look at the site plan? I didn't quite follow exactly what.
Landscape plan.
Is that an unknown street?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me, oh wait, sorry, where is that? Let me zoom in.
Hey,
here.
David.
Yeah.
I've got Google Earth. I'm
Yeah,
showing.
Google Earth shows are great. I'm looking at it
Okay.
right now too.
Sure.
So this is the corner where they were adding landscape. I think it was requested by the neighbors.
Yes.
Possibly. This is the end of the street. And looking at street view, I saw some already fairly new looking landscape that was up in this corner.
So you're recommending just that they pay attention to what had recently been planted and incorporated it to the plan that they have. Okay.
That main street is just pedestrian.
I think so.
It's in pretty bad shape.
Can I, from the civil engineering standpoint, just asking, it does provide a tertiary access on a vehicular standpoint from Parkwood Estates, Parkwood Heights, all of that area over there. Is there a good reason not to maintain the opening of that street?
For vehicular access, it depends on who owns it. I don't know who owns the right of way, if it's privately owned, if there's access to it. I think from a transportation planning standpoint, any cross connections is looked favorably upon unless there's objections to the neighborhood and again, whoever owns the right of way.
Yes, I can speak to that for a second. I don't know who owns it. Certainly can do some research and find out quickly, but that was closed before we ever started our development. And while I think it would be convenient for some, at the same time, there's also 2 houses that are on both sides of that. If I was one of those homeowners, I would despise having that access. And I think, if I lived in that subdivision, while it would be convenient, I would feel probably apprehensive to having that access because it could potentially cause more traffic through a residential area.
Donna, do you have any insight on that, on Main Street?
No, I agree with the applicant. I think we might put a little cut through stress, and since
We have such a great pedestrian.
feel to the area, enhancing the pedestrianization, biking.
I think a better going back to the car.
Do we know what were the neighbors asking? You said they've been asking for improvements, but do we know like what exactly they're
I don't
doing?
exactly, I was just told this through an article.
Okay.
I didn't hear it firsthand.
My general understanding is just, it's not as inviting as it might be, and to do a little bit of improvement to make it a little more enticing for folks to walk through.
Yeah, I mean, looking
It's
at
pretty rough.
the Google Earth right now, the sidewalk connection terminates in the dumpster pad.
Right.
So maybe just something, I don't know what you can do to.
I know that we're really kind of limited to the site, but looking at this connection.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's not going to be a vehicular connection.
Well, and I think too, back to the question of who owns the right of way is maybe doing research there. And if it is owned by the city, to at least improve that right of way for cyclists and pedestrians. If there is the legal access to do so.
I think that you have an ally back there that could help you in some of that.
Yes.
And Katie, to your point, I think as far as ADA, I think this venue, but I think also maybe reaching out to Janet Schumacher as well. Okay. Okay.
So, sort of discussion,
We are.
yeah.
Just a
Respect the
reminder,
digression.
please, everybody keep their voices up, please, for the recording.
I guess I can, in addition to that comment about finding out more about this unnamed street and maybe making this connection a little bit more, not terminating in a dumpster, probably is a good step forward with that. Can you zoom out to the whole site plan? We can kind of start here. From a landscape point of view, the canopy trees are all very, there are not many of them, but they are monoculture. They're all, look like they're all ball cypress or ball cypress. Might want to look at some variety. That same comment could be across this whole plant list. I would look at the location of a certain plant that's on here. I won't go into that until we get to preliminary, but especially around pedestrian areas. This patio area, I think that there are a lot of instances of concrete that could be broken up, and you could incorporate a palm or
All right, I was trying to zoom in, but I just messed up.
a palm, a canopy tree, something kind of, if you're intending those to be use areas, it would be nice for something to lower the heat gain out there, I think. I do think this building, especially with the amount of parking you're over, could potentially set back just a little bit. And then get you some verticality on the front of this building that doesn't look like there's any overhead power out there. It would be nice to get something between this building and the street, or the building and the pedestrian area, that makes that more of a comfortable walk. Incorporation of different paving materials, I think, would be good. Once again, I would focus more on the backs of these buildings, especially when we're talking about back of the buildings in line. Especially we're talking about bringing pedestrians from the back. It's really would be very tragic to bring them into a delivery area. And kind of, yeah, we're doing a connection to what? So that's just a thought in mind. Of looking at the site, I guess.
I have two, are you, okay, I have two other thoughts just while we're on the landscape plan that I think could help. One is just kind of piggybacking on what Andy said, that I understand that, the city said they want the buildings up close to the street, and that is generally a good move. It creates more presence, it, creates a safer feeling place, but there's kind of an in-between where you can have it where it's addressing the street, but it's set far back enough that there's a comfortable space for people between them. So I don't think we're suggesting going against what the city originally asked for. It's just adding a little more cushion so that it can welcome pedestrians instead of having it jammed right up against sidewalk and street, because it is such a high speed and busy street. You need a little bit more space for people to feel comfortable. So I think you can do it without, overthrowing the previous comment that it should be close to the street and addressing it. I think it's just nudging it back enough to make some space for people. And then the other comment is somewhat minor, but it's why I asked about the parking lot. Because I noticed that maybe part of the parking lot, there's no proposed landscaping there. So I didn't know if you were keeping it, but if it is going to be re-landscaped, I would request that, for example, these islands, if they could be pushed back, I know you can't have more than, 10 or 12 in a row. But you could, instead of doing 10 and then 2, you could do 6 and 6, and it would break up the pavement more because you'd be putting the canopy trees, like spreading them more evenly through the asphalt. So it just creates a more welcoming and comfortable place, and it helps break up the hardscape. So again, I'm not sure if that's part of this project, if we're redoing, parking islands and curbs and everything, but if so, I think that would be a nice gesture that would really improve the feeling of that parking lot. Exactly, yeah. I know, that's what jumped out at me when I first looked at the site plan. That's all I have.
Back to the overall elevation.
I think the hyphen needs to read as a hyphen. It's jumbled, especially since it's being shown proud of the new. Should probably read as 2 buildings connected by this, even though it's existing, it can still be articulated as a hyphen. It might mean limiting the new building to a single. You have this more prominent, the fiber. It's not fiber cement. It's plaster, I guess. What is it? Tectum facade that might have to be the more prominent and central to make it read as a second but still subservient building, and then the hyphen can be a secondary language there. I was curious what the landscape people thought about that's even review, because they have this nice in front of Whole Foods. It's this nice kind of, I think it's curbless, right? And it's this paver area, but it's a different condition in front of the new building because you have the parking in front. But I'm wondering if there's still some way of dragging a bit of that
I
niceness.
think it needs to bring it across.
Yeah, I agree.
I'd like to see you get rid of the parking and extend it out the same way that Whole Foods is. I mean, you show all these people sitting out in front of Whole Foods. It'd be nice to show it 500 and 600. Sorry, Lucas, go ahead.
Oh, no problem. That's
Yeah, I agree. I would bring that building 500 and 600 out further, make it so it's a connection on a hyphen or something there. The renderings look like the hyphen is in front of 5 and 600.
Yeah.
Where it's actually in the same plane.
One comment I would make about that, 2 things. We'll look at shifting the parking islands if we can, if that's already in a disturbed area. If it's not in a disturbed area, that opens a whole can of worms related to stormwater and things that we probably can't get into. And then the other thing I would say about it is they kind of rim the road currently. And I think there's some separation there to help delineate that drive aisle that we would need to look at. But then as far as eliminating the head-in parking in front of 500, 600, certainly, we can certainly look at that. But, if we're pushing 300 back, you're going to be eating into drive aisle or parking. And while we do have a bit of a parking surplus, we don't have much of a parking surplus. And losing parking is certainly a problem overall for the development. So certainly, I think it would need to be an either or. If you were to push 300 back, and if you're eliminating the head-in parking, I think you're causing a real problem. And then if you you can maybe do one or the other. I don't think we could do both. And honestly, losing parking is a problem, even though jurisdictionally we're overparked. We're not overparked from a use standpoint, and certainly from our
Understood.
customers.
We're in more discussion. We'll let you know if you have any questions or if we state anything that's inaccurate, then please speak up. Thank you.
I had a couple of comments down here. Let's see. I think it's building 200. It shows concrete block painted back next to the electrical and gas meters. I would ask those buildings, I think you got it on 300, but have it covered in either the brick veneer or another materials. See. And I think as a board, we've usually asked to cover or screen a lot of those utility areas. I think you can see it in like the elevation on the back where there's a big gang electrical panel run, gas meters, some kind of screening or something on the west elevation.
Of building 200.
Right. But I do agree with staff comments that the pavers should be continued in front of building 500 and 600. And if we're plus 44 spots, I mean, it'd be really nice to give something back to West Ashley folks in front of those shops and having tables, seats, whatever.
You could do some, I mean, it wouldn't gain you back all of them, but you could do some parallel parking.
Yeah.
Or some angled or something, I think you'll run into a fire problem with a one-way situation right there in front of the door. But I think that, study, I guess the best way to say is study a way to extend. I think getting the pavers over there is a good, and even if you were to incorporate that head-in parking, that it could become something else, that have something else out there, Some of these have started out parking and then become patio areas, it just see what your traffic patterns are like. But or parallel parking. I mean, it's a type of parking style from a bygone era, especially with these sorts of stores.
I think studying it is a great way to word it. This conceptual that still gives us the right to review it again at preliminary.
It'd be nice to move that front facade building 300. I get I'm sure the sprinkler room's there because the fire line's right there on the street, so it's very convenient, I'm guessing. Maybe instead of making it a feature, recess it in the building. I mean, it just, these two utility doors right there on the front pedestrian path, they're going to be utility doors. There's no way around it. Or investigate, look at putting it on the northern side of that location in a more hidden, not made into an architectural feature.
Back to the building.
I can appreciate the fact that there's nothing contextual to draw upon. And I know the struggles that you go through in this regard. But I think what's missing in that, what I would like to see is a more cohesive relationship regarding not only the vehicular parking, but the manner in which the pedestrian begins to navigate. Maybe even more so a little bit of a sense of a village, which is a collection of the buildings that you're having here. And one of the components that helps Whole Food design a great deal is the canopy. I think it was mentioned before, and I'm assuming that when you're talking about the seating plaza in the front, it's the whole ambiance of the shade and the canopy and everything. And it seems that it's voided as far as the balance of the structures. In one way, as Lucas was suggesting, possibly consider to reinforce that hyphen is to look at building 500 and provide a canopy feature. And granted, it would be getting rid of those cars in the front. Whereas I appreciate greatly the economics of the parking aspect, there is an absence of unity in a three-dimensional manner that's happening here. And if, I don't know, you guys from this point to some manner, it seems like it would be a wonderful opportunity to reintroduce that canopy again. The other thing on the elevation, look at that overall elevation, it kind of just fades out toward the end. And I'm wanting something to happen here that kind of terminates this line of the elevation and possibly just the placement of where those gray panels are might be a help in some fashion.
And the length there of facade to almost treat it as a microcosm of a traditional Main Street,
You do.
given the pedestrian, if the pedestrian experience is treated properly.
The other issue is I think it's been said before, 200 and 300, just particularly on 300, I really would like more transparency as opposed to putting the riser on the Savannah Highway street facade. There's no clever way to do this, and there's just idea again that there would just be a better location for that riser.
I struggle with this. I get, but to me, it seems like a very logical extension of the Whole Foods. The whole thing's very logical. Like you look at the facade and it's like, yeah, A equals A. Right? The part that I really struggle with is the placemaking. And I think all the things we're talking about is really placemaking. Canopies make sense at Whole Foods. They provide dining. We have patios listed on the site plan, but the architecture doesn't really respond to it. Building, whatever it was, back, I think it's 300. It's laughable. There's three chairs or three tables on the corner. Who wants to sit on that corner? It's like 5 feet from the intersection. So I just struggle with this idea of this being a place. Yes, it will be businesses, and yes, it will be tenants, and yes, it will be successful because it's building on something that's already there. I know it can be more. I know it can be more. The things we're talking about, the connectivity, the architecture responding to the activities would be helpful. And bicycles and get lost, like that road to nowhere or whatever it is up in the right corner. It sounds like a cool opportunity, but it is so underthought right now. It is just like, I got to do something, so I'm going to do something up there. But the back, it faces the back of the architecture. Like the landscaping would suggest, like as you pointed out, that there's something there. Like there's landscaping and green and grass on. But you look at the elevations and it's painted block and roof access ladder and utilities. I struggle with like where are people coming from. I think we got it from a car, understood. But where are the other connection points that can inform the architecture? Like the end of that line, 500, 600, it can be something that could draw people from or give somebody a destination to go to. But right now it's the back of the building. There's some things that are very logical, absolutely make sense. Other than the expression of the architecture, it just feels like a typical strip mall. It's just got a different skin on it. I would focus, and we've seen several of these buildings in the past that are a collection of retail buildings. That one at Bees Ferry comes to mind. It makes a place. That's indeed, the space between buildings are really interesting. So I struggle with this because it doesn't make a place. It makes businesses.
And that's an excellent point. That's really, it's hard to talk about a pedestrian-oriented, pedestrian-friendly environment when we haven't addressed the pedestrians.
You know, I've said this before about. This is It's buildings amongst.
Mhm.
Which came
Real
first?
quick, David just informed me that, I don't know if everyone saw it, but we had an email that was sent to us from David, from Eric Pullman, the city's West Ashley project coordinator. Did everyone see that, or should I read it all out for the record?
I saw it. I appreciate the.
There by virtue of where it is.
Yeah.
Of course, it's going to be a place. It is going to be. It's a successful place. I think you pointed it out. The parking lot is always full. Successful, no doubt. I know we can take it to the next level.
Mhm.
I want to make one more point too, because Venus picked up on it earlier, but I want to make sure that it's in our discussion as well for the record. When you asked about the green spaces behind. And I think that's such a significant thing that looking at the plan, the most obvious and cohesive green space is really just for service and delivery. And I think that's a problem. And I don't think we've articulated that. So I just wanted to make sure in our discussion as well, because by shuffling things around, we could bring some of that green space out potentially and make it a space that people, or connect it to that rear access, or put it in front of the building or something so that it's a space that people can actually use, because it's there. But right now it's for delivery trucks, and that's.
You
I think-
could potentially push those two buildings back further if all that is for deliveries.
Yeah.
You know, that would help create your plaza in the front.
I think we all know that deliveries are I don't call them necessary evil, but I mean, they're necessary, but there's ways to also incorporate pedestrian experience, other ways. I mean, look at the Victory, which came before us last year before, and it has like the dual access, but also still maintains the deliveries in the rear of house, so to speak, business aspects too.
We're like, struggling to lose small parking spaces, and then you have that much space in the back that's vacant that could be an asset for the community.
And when you're talking about an excess of roughly 44 parking spaces, and again, I greatly appreciate the aspect of the economics toward the spaces, but at some point we have to come to a decision as to the balance between the pedestrian experience and the parking demand and requirements. And I think that my feeling is that there's more work to be done before I can feel comfortable with conceptual approval to see more of an evolution as far as really defining if truly. I think I'm like Jeff. I think that it's the architect and the developer have certainly demonstrated the creativity and the capacity, and we've talked a lot about the tie back into the Greenway, which is just a block up the road, and the little access off of Sunset Drive or Boulevard, whatever. I just would love to be able to get a better sense of a little village concept of that balances that pedestrian and vehicular access. So I'm saying the same thing over and over again. I'm willing to make a motion.
I'm ready. I do see that there's a lot of locked in, like the buildings are locked in just based on parking and circulation. I can see that, and I see it. It's going to be really tough to move a building 20 feet. But to reappropriate the spaces, the green spaces that are there to actually usable space, that's critical. That's a major move, and that seems to be one that's easy. The building 300, that's a tough nut.
Yeah,
I agree with that. But
And we've asked people to do it before.
well, I mean, even if you move the riser room to another location, that begins to suggest. But anyway, I interrupted you.
I just think that even in those landlocked moments, you can respond to pathways and connections and patios and just the way the building's going to be used. I think even in those small moments, small movements, you can make moves towards. Right now, I think they're just architectural elements that kind of make sense together based on the logic that's already in place. But how can those elements be used in a way that creates some space?
And I think it really could be, once again, I'm kind of sitting here looking at this. I think there's some materiality even in the landscape, the land. It could be as simple as we're talking about the pavers in front of the store extending. Well, what if that, I mean, you have this loop here. Kind of see where I'm sitting, and as bad as my glasses are, as just a white line. Well, what if this becomes a little bit more? What if that's a different paver, different element, a little bit wider, or maybe this is this wide throughout the whole, and you start to get trees in here, landscaping in here, that becomes something. This and this, you know, this shifts back as we talked about, and you get some materiality up front. This comes across and you pick up, you know, we do normally very much try to not, you know, these are all just suggestions.
Right.
But, you know, I'm just kind of trying to illustrate how simple some of this could be within the tone of what is already there.
Totally.
Yeah, and when I'm talking,
Yeah.
when I'm talking about a connection on that unknown street, we gotta find a name.
That's not Bo Jackson Way.
It's not Bo Jackson Way, Johnny Rogers. But you know, people are using in neighborhoods now golf carts all over the place. I mean, can we accommodate golf carts through this area? And I recognize that we have to be very cognizant of our neighbors on both sides of that access way. And once we find out, I mean, it's pretty easy to find out who owns the property, but it may begin to give us a little bit more, and therefore, again, a little bit more tie into Parkwood Estates and the neighborhood back there.
I mean, I think that could, looking at the condition of that on Google Earth, if you know, if we could find out who that belongs to and they'd be willing to, I mean, I think you could take that road bed, you know, somebody could take that road bed out there and make it, you know, make it something nice. It doesn't, a piece of road that's slowly disintegrating into a small sidewalk with some trees could be a real landscape, you know, a greenway. It's another greenway. And
the other thing I would love to see addressed ultimately is, I mean, we're all being required to address the manner that our new buildings are responding to Charleston Rises and the requirements of the city. We haven't had any discussion in that regard with respects to this at all, but just another thought that I'm assuming that because this is all existing, that stormwater.
They probably have some reduction requirements based on a redevelopment site.
Okay.
This would have been with the old manual, not the new manual, if I recall correctly, based on the years.
That's not.
Are you in the new,
You're in the new standard, yes.
with just this site or the whole site initially?
Initially, it was the whole site. We've worked with stormwater management, get it to the new site, but it is.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, this is exciting and don't want you to, we are all embracing and engaging and seeing what the possibilities are here. And quite candidly, Whole Food gives a certain definition of expectation. So I'm willing to make a motion.
Do I get to comment again on anything?
No, unfortunately, unless we've stated anything that's incorrect.
Well, I got a chance to speak after they talk.
No, you will not.
I think that there's a lot yet to be resolved. And I think we've all talked about so many questions with respects to it all. And whereas I do believe that this will be an absolutely positive evolution of the site although we will miss the anchors that were doshers. We understand the evolution that goes on. But I'd hate to miss the opportunity to really expand upon what the possibilities are here. I don't want to even, I'm sure that somewhere on this site, there's bicycle parking.
Yeah.
By looking at it. It's not pointed, it's not labeled if it is, I couldn't find it.
You probably could shed light on that. Right, yeah.
But you have.
Okay.
Well, and I'm just going to take a shot and I need some help in this. I would move for deferral with staff comments 2 through 6, 2 through 7. With board comments, provide as much transparency in the buildings, new buildings as possible.
Say that again, Dino, sorry.
Provide as much transparency in the new buildings. Develop a stronger scheme that incorporates the pedestrian experience, embracing more of a village concept. Stop me if I'm going wrong.
Landscape and architecture.
I'm sorry?
Landscape and architecture.
Yeah, landscape and architecture. Re-examine the access from Parkwood Estates off Sunset.
Sunset Drive.
Let's say the unknown, I think the unknown right of way at this point.
But off of Bojackson Lake. Let's get that on record.
Let's get that on the record. We are on record. I think that just say that incorporate that access into the overall
planning.
plan.
Examine the possibility of strengthening the hyphen.
Say that one again.
Strengthen the hyphen by possibly incorporating similar canopy as existing on Whole Foods. Erin, how would you state the aspect of the green space on the rear? And
I was thinking, trying to think of a succinct way to say it, but it could apply to potentially the green space on the rear and the tree islands. Just maybe study the distribution of green spaces within the overall plan.
that works. Simple. And Ben brought up to ensure that all utilities on the exterior are properly screened.
I don't think there should be any exposed block on the near center highway.
Yeah. Exposed block. That's on building 200.
Adding, studying the, I know it's in staff, but I think we need to reiterate to study how those parking spaces in front of the buildings are incorporated into the paving pattern.
Study parking in front of buildings 500 and 600.
Parking in front.
Shifting building 300 back.
Yes.
or how that can be accomplished to create a pedestrian buffer. Diversity in the landscape plan.
The building 300 needs to be shifted back, right?
Right, that's what we all feel. Okay, so I need anything on building.
5 and 6.
I think 5 and 6 need to be studied.
Rear of the building.
Yeah, how would you? Rookie.
You mentioned some sort of termination on building 600.
Yes,
And I think something that was, so studying a termination of building 600. Being in the rear of building 600. Because it's so visible from this road to nowhere.
What about the rear of building 600?
Maybe elevating the design.
elevating the facade.
Rear facade or just the,
That approach.
elevate the design? Okay. So I have a motion for deferral with staff comments 2 through 7. Board comments, number 1, provide as much transparency in the new buildings as possible. 2, develop a stronger scheme for pedestrian experience and embracing more of a village concept. 3, re-examine access from the unknown right-of-way and incorporate it into the planning. 4, strengthen the hyphen by possibly incorporating a similar canopy as shown or as built on Whole Foods. 5, study the distribution of the green space within the overall plan. 6, all exterior building utilities should be screened. 7, omit exposed block on building 200. Building 200, correct?
Yes.
Study parking and the parking pattern in front of buildings 500 and 600. 9, shift building 300 slightly away from Savannah Highway. Again, as a side note, we're not saying to move it off of Savannah Highway, but just to shift it slightly. 10, provide more diversity in the landscape palette. 11, study the termination of building 600. And 12, elevate the design of the rear approach of building 600. That comprehensive motion.
I had a question, Madam Chair.
Let me get to it. Let's get to it.
Yeah, it just, you said staff comments 2 through 7. 2 through 7 or 2 through 6?
That's 7th
Oh,
comment.
it is 7?
Yes. Okay, so we have a motion to approve. Is there a second? Thank you, Aaron. Any further discussion? Is there anything else, Ben? I'll now call roll. Ben,
Yes, in favor.
Andy,
Yes.
Jeff,
I'm in favor.
Lucas,
Yes.
and I'm also yes in favor. Thank you all very much. We'll move on to agenda item number 3, and David will get you all of the comments, which is approval of the minutes from the April 4th, 2022 meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Dinos. Is there a second? Thank you, Ben. Any further discussion? We'll roll. Andy? Aaron? Yes. Jeff?
Yes.
Lucas?
Yes.
Yes, in favor. And we're done. Got a motion. Does anyone remember who seconded the demo approval?
So these are one use, David.
Yeah. I was mistaken
Are we
when I
all-
said you could use them.
Is that recording?
Unlimited parking.
I know, man.